Welcome, everyone, to Senior to Seniors, the podcast where experience matters, where wisdom is shared, and living well at every stage of life is always the goal. I'm Jim Mazziotti. I'm a realtor, author, speaker, and a seniors real estate specialist with over 3 decades of experience helping seniors and families make smart, confident decisions about their future. And this show is dedicated to bringing you trusted experts, real conversations, and practical guidance that helps you stay informed, stay independent, and empowered. Today's guest is someone you're going to be very glad you spent time with, and maybe the most important podcast I've done. Scott Fulton is an internationally recognized leader in the positive aging and health span space. He is the author, educator, and he is a researcher of 2 groundbreaking books, WHEALTHSPAN and FUNCTION, which challenge everything we've been told about aging in America. Scott teaches health span and aging at Northwestern University, the University of Virginia, and the University of Delaware. He is a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, sits on the True Health Initiative Council, and is a past president of the National Aging in Place Council. What makes Scott unique is this: he doesn't deal in hype, hacks, hope-based promises. He deals in hard data, real-world function, and measurable results, helping people add not just years to their life, but life to their years. So if you've ever wondered, how well am I really aging? How long can I stay independent? How can I still change? And what truly matters now? I think you're going to want to lean in. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Jim, thanks very much. That's a wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. I hope I can live up to it now.
I'm sure you will. And first, I want to show the 2 books that you have written, because I think that it's something that everyone should have in their library, especially as they age, and maybe even before they start aging, so they can start the process early. You know, one of my regrets is I didn't start my planning for retirement until I was retired. That's the wrong approach. And I think health is the same thing. You don't wait until there's problems. You take preventative medicine, so to speak, in order to take care of yourself. The first book is this book here, called WHEALTHSPAN: More Years, More Moments, More Money for Everyday Mortals, Proven by Millions, by Scott B. Fulton. And I'm sure this is available as I got it on Amazon and everywhere where books are sold. So this is one of the 2 books. The second book that I got was the book Function, which is a perfect partner to the first book. And the subtitle is Turn Your Blind Spots into Strengths. I don't think many times subtitles are pointed out when people are talking about books. And I think the subtitles, especially in these 2 books, are really important. And so Scott, tell me a little bit about you that I haven't covered. First of all, where are you coming from today? Where are you at?
Well, having done many things, I've also lived a number of places, so I'll kind of get out front. I'm Canadian in terms of my heritage, so if you hear the out and about, that's usually the 2 words that give me away. So I'll give you that kind of short history. I grew up in the Niagara area, and moved out to west, out in Canada, out near Calgary, or Banff, Alberta. The tourists know that.
Yeah.
Got transferred at the time I was working for DuPont. They transferred me to head office in Delaware. And then in 2021, my wife and I moved down to Charlottesville, Virginia, back to a university town, which I lived in, a university town in Canada for 25 years, and really enjoyed it and love it here in Virginia.
Yeah, I actually have some Calgary roots myself. My mother was from a little town called Stettler, in that province. And so I claim to be Italian. And I got a little buzzer every time I hear you say something funny Canadian. I'm going to buzz it, when you say out. And no, I won't buzz you today. That's perfectly fine. So where'd Northwestern University come? I think Chicago. Did you spend some time in Chicago as well, or?
Well, it's so I'll back up a little bit. When I left corporate, I decided I really want to do something different, and I'll kind of get to the Northwestern story by that route.
Okay.
And I wanted to work in aging. I decided, I'd been really looking at it for a number of years, and I decided there's an opportunity here to do something different that, really significant unaddressed needs.
Yeah.
And I decided to do the aging in place space first. Right. So I went from corporate doing licensing deals for DuPont with global reach on that to doing something very much in people's bedrooms and kitchens, if you will. And then University of Delaware asked if I would come and teach to adults in the community there. And then when I moved down to Virginia, at the same request here, but so I continued to teach virtually at Delaware. And then through that connection, Northwestern asked if someone through Virginia asked if I'd be interested in teaching at Northwestern. The interesting thing about Northwestern, so it's virtual that I teach at Northwestern, but their class, when I teach that, goes out to over 50 schools around the country concurrently. So it's, to me, I've been a lot of my years in innovation, with the research side, innovation, where's the ball going?
Yeah.
What I love about the Northwestern is they're breaking some of the boundaries of the brick and mortar and saying, no, we can do something more than what we have been doing in the past and reach more people more effectively. Because quite honestly, what I teach, no one else teaches in the country. And I've heard that over and over. And so that's kind of fun. And it's like, I do it because I want to help people. So the more I can reach them, the better it is for everyone.
So you walked away basically from a corporate gig and, probably some retirement and other stuff that would go along with it, and a paycheck to dive into this because you wanted to make a difference, I would guess.
Yeah. It was, I left the easy job. I left a job that a whole bunch of people on my floor, would have loved to have had, but it wasn't for me. That's all it was. And and at the time, well, not at the time, DuPont continues to go through difficult times. As the market's changed on those big old 200-year companies, it's been tough for them the last couple of decades. So yeah, it's. But I've got an entrepreneurial background. My father was an entrepreneur. So, I don't mind the challenge. And in fact, I seem to need a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you write beautifully and you do a great job. And so tell me how you came about to, writing the first book, WhealthSpan. How did that happen? And you call it HealthSpan instead of lifespan. What's the difference between the two? Can you explain that to us?
Sure. And that's actually a really important question. And I'll kind of throw longevity in there too. Those are kind of lifespan, longevity, health span are all words that are thrown out there. So lifespan is the hard number in terms of how long do people live, or how long will you live? How long did your parents live, for example? How many years? Longevity is kind of this term that's, it's a buzzword, and it means something different depending on who you ask, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of associated with longer life. The expectation is it's healthier. And so that's really where health span is a definition. So I'll say there's two definitions of health span. The one is the medical definition, which is as long as you live without chronic disease.
Okay.
Well, that's a pretty tough bar. Mm-hmm. And so that's the medical definition, which most people reject unless you happen to be in that world. And I kind of get to span both. So for most people I talk to, health span is pretty simple. It's as long as I can continue to do the things that I want to do, that I love to do, and that I need to do, right? And that's really kind of ties back to independence for us. So that's really what I work to. It's what I teach. It's what I write to. How long can we continue to be in charge of our options, really, and how do we keep our options open as long as possible and have the best options available to us?
Yeah, and so the function book, was that a planned book when you wrote WealthSpan? Was that something?
No, not at all.
But you knew but I assume you just knew it was something you needed to write. It needed to be a sister to this book, or another piece of that book.
Yeah. So WhealthSpan came about of capturing what I teach in class. Again, how can I help reach more people with this information? And everyone said, well, you need to do this more. And even before the pandemic, I was getting ready to teach online and had, the video equipment, before everyone else had heard of Zoom. I grew in corporate. I was doing video conferencing years ago, right? So none of this was new to me.
Yeah.
I never did get the class going online. So I decided, well, maybe I'll write the book then. And that will be a way of essentially consolidating a lot of the elements that people want and need to know about, ideally before they have to know about it. Exactly. So it's really, how can you learn about these things? And it's not a recipe, and I don't teach this way either, around what to do. It's more around, here's the framework. It's always the way I've managed people. I don't want to micromanage anything. Mm-hmm. If I have to micromanage, I go really deep, really fine, and I have to choose when to do that. I don't do that when I manage people, and I don't do that in how I teach, because I don't know your background. I don't know your priorities, your culture, what your health is. I shouldn't have to know all that. But if I can give you a framework to start to work within, where you can mainly start asking better questions. Mm-hmm. My students, I think, are pretty smart. A lot of them are professionals, some retired, some not. They just don't know the right question to ask. And once you get on a pattern of the right questions, you will quickly answer them. You may have the answers yourself already, but you'll get some verification around, no, that is the right answer for me, or, oh, I wasn't looking at it right. I wasn't asking the right question. So WhealthSpan was really kind of this big look at what is aging, kind of on the spectrum of aging. What are the key questions? Function honestly came to me quite by accident, and it's because I'm a researcher. Right? I like asking questions. I like big challenges. And I honestly don't remember when it was that it happened, because it wasn't one particular moment. But I think it goes back to, again, I've always had this interest in aging. I've always had an interest in disabilities. I had a young, which you read in the book, a childhood friend who went into a wheelchair at quite a young age, and we just adapted and moved on, right? Because that's what kids do. But it always had kept my eye open for disabilities, and it occasionally worked its way into my work. And so when I looked later and I started to think about function, understanding how we move is really important. We all see this, right? Go to the airport, watch how people move, and you will quickly get an experience that will be somewhat eye-opening when you get outside your normal circle. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as I started to look at it and ask some questions, what I discovered was there was an enormous amount of data on functional testing. Okay? People have been doing functional testing for decades. Mm-hmm. But what they hadn't been doing was pulling that into the healthy, normal, average audience.
Yeah.
Right? So most functional testing is done by the geriatricians or gerontologists just before you're at risk of losing your activities of daily living.
Yeah.
Right? Which is the way medicine works, right?
Yeah.
We'll step in after you have a problem, not before. So it's consistent. There's functional testing that's done with pro athletes to get them back on the field. It's done, like workers have an injury, we'll get you back. You had a slip and a fall, we need to get you to physio. So it's always been a corrective measure. But in the middle of all this, which in the perimeter are over 30 subspecialties that all do functional testing, including cognitive testing is in there too. Uh-huh. No one had ever thought to say, well, what do they all say as a composite? What do they say for that population, which is your reference population across these elements of function that could inform the general public? And so as I started to dig into it, the data was just all there. There have been great longitudinal studies, which is, again, for aging, you want large longitudinal studies, not little like laboratory things or a half a dozen people or, selected that have, whatever intentional or unintentional biases. You want large sets of data where you can follow many individuals over decades to find out what are the patterns, right? If we know anything about AI, it's understanding patterns matter.
Yeah.
And so that's the patterns we're looking for. And so I just started to dig into it. And the more I got into it, the more excited about it, because what I realized was this is the first data and the most reliable data that anyone can use to find out where they are today and where they're going.
What do you mean it's the first data?
So no one has ever put this together as a composite to look and say, are you on track? So it's, again, if I do an injury rehab, right, and we need to get, you've got a leg injury, the goal is to get you back to the 50th percentile.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to find out was, well, what does 50th percentile mean? Well, because there's an endpoint to this, which is health span.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We know what 50th percent health span looks like on a whole range of tests and what age you're going to hit that.
Yeah.
That's like, that doesn't exist in any other data in any other world.
And, if I can sum up a little bit about function, what the notes that I took and the information that I was able to gather, what makes function different, and it's different in many ways, but one is you have 44 simple at-home assessments, right? There's no labs, there's no wearables, and it measures what your body and brain can actually do. And it reveals hidden blind spots before they become limitations. And gosh, we're a society where we wait until it happens, right? Until something bad happens, especially, seniors. I see it all the time, and creates a repeatable, trackable path to improving health span. So that's kind of a summation of what function is about. And it's done so well, so powerfully well, that with the diagrams that you have as well, and I think you're in most of those diagrams, if I'm correct. That's you.
Well, my wife is in a bunch of them as well.
Yeah.
Which was great because she works out all the time and she's very shy about getting in front of the camera.
Well, but it's not because she could do some of those things that you were unable to do.
It was just to get some variety. Yeah, it was. Yeah, no, it was. I was very fortunate that I got her at a weak moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the information is fantastic, and you're right. It's a composite of everything, and it's all in one place. And I know when I went to my chiropractor 2 years ago for some back problems, I went through some similar things like that are in your function book. I went through a little bit. Some of those things were familiar to me. So, but it's not gathered in one place where there's 44 markers that people can use. So tell me, your research shows many people fall short of their potential of healthy years. So what do you see are the biggest blind spots seniors don't realize and are quietly shortening their independence? What blind spots do seniors especially have?
There's one would simply be self-awareness, right? Aware of their body in space.
Yeah.
Right. And we can define that any number of ways, and it is somewhat individual, right? And that's this, I'll kind of keep coming back. There's this theme throughout the book is all I care about is helping you find where you are, right? And because we're inundated with information around, you need to do more strength training, right? Because osteoporosis is clearly a larger risk for women, it's a risk for men too. So you need to do more strength training. Okay, that may be true for a majority of the population, but it doesn't mean that you need to do it or that that's the key element for you. And you touched on it earlier, which is also where the subtitle of the book came, right, is finding your blind spot.
Yeah.
And if you think about it like the weak chain in the link, right, you could have all the strength in the world. That's not going to prevent you from falling and breaking a hip.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is where people generally, again, they talk themselves into certain mindsets and their beliefs around, well, I do this. And so I'll say in people who are active, when I talk about function, the defense mechanism kicks in and they quickly say, well, I go to the gym 5 times a week.
Sure, that's exactly, yeah. And I felt that too as I was reading through. It's like, well, one of the things, your grip strength is one of the things you talk about, and it's one of the most important markers, as I understood in your book. And mine is pretty weak, but I say, well, it's because I have arthritis in my hands, and it has nothing to do with my real strength. So I think a lot of it are the blind spots of people. They tend to do this. I don't want to accept it, and I won't accept it, and then they wait until it shortens their independence. Where it really
right. So the idea is really, again, what you need to find out is what's your, you could say, what's your weak spot. I'd prefer to flip around and say, what's your opportunity? Because for most people, that's the low-hanging fruit. That's much easier to get a gain in something you're weak in than something if you're already, go to the gym and you're already quite strong, and for whatever reason you feel you need to do 5 more pounds or 2 more reps of something, that's often where we want to go, right? Because we're trying to find or protect our identity as I'm someone who's really strong in the gym. And the flip side of that is, well, I don't talk about my balance because it's not that important.
Yeah.
Right? And I'll just avoid those conversations in my head and with others. And that's really what the book is about, is to give you an opportunity to do some very simple, like a single leg stand. How long can you do that? And to find out if you're great and you really don't need to worry about balance, that's great. And if you find out it is a problem, then you have a choice. No one's telling you what to do, to say, are you comfortable living with that, knowing that that's your weak link?
Yeah.
And you could fix it relatively easily.
Yeah. In your book, Scott, you say that genetics and supplements are not the answer. Can you talk about that just a little bit, about what you found with supplements and, genetics as well?
Sure. So let's talk genetics first, and that's certainly been a changing landscape over the last couple of decades. Most of us grew up with a belief that essentially our genetics are predetermined. Yes, they are, and so I'm going to live as long as my parents, because that's the reference point that most of us look to.
Yeah.
And then we'll have some adjustment for that that maybe my parents smoked, as many did, and so, well, I don't smoke, so I'm going to live longer than my parents. So we've got some adjustment that we overlay on that, but generally that's our default. Reality is, we know now today that genetics is a minor player in terms of health span and lifespan. It's in the order of about 15 to 20% is comfortable with. That's the amount of genetics, and the other big lever is this big ball of things we call lifestyle. Yeah. So those are the things we have control over. And then the supplements is really around, it's not that there's anything wrong with supplements. I certainly take some supplements. But just ask yourself, what is supplement? What does that word mean? It's not a replacement. It's a supplement on top of what you're doing with, whether it's food or diet. And the idea where I always try to take people to when they want to ask about supplements and which ones to take, the first question you should ask yourself is, do I know that I have a deficiency?
Mm-hmm.
Pick any supplement you want.
Sure.
You can pretty much measure where you are, not all of them, but a good number. And if you're not addressing a deficiency, then you're just taking it to feel good. Depending on how much that supplement costs, or you can spend a lot of money on supplements over a course of a month, over a course of a year, over a course of a decade, to just feel good. And it may have some negative effects that aren't included, like excipients that are in the gel coating on a supplement you're taking, for example. that you'd be better to take ideally from food directly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's totally mysterious to me because there are so many people pushing so many supplements to know which ones are a supplement that you actually need rather than one that will do whatever, make you a man of steel or whatever it can be. So it's really difficult. And gosh, they're pushed so much, Scott. It's just hard to know.
Yeah, the other, and supplements take work to resolve, and that's what I try to encourage people is if you're going to take it, do the work, because unfortunately, in most cases, the work has not been done for you. There have not been randomly controlled clinical trials like there are for drug efficacy and drug safety.
Mm-hmm.
Those generally don't exist in the supplement world. And so when you go to look at the data, it's really hard to find good data because it may have just been animal studies, never tested on humans for any number of reasons. It may have been a couple of small trials that were interesting, but again, that doesn't mean it works on a large population. Most people don't want to go to the trouble to read the study to find out who the population, what was the age of the population,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? What was the background of them? Were they healthy going in? Did they already have some diseases? These are all the things that unfortunately really are required when you want to start thinking about supplements. And it takes a lot of work. It's really more work. And that's what people are taking them for, right? Is I don't want to do the work. I just want to take the supplement.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that tension between them. It's a hard and a complex world. I've been involved in the supplement industry to know, how they're made and how they're tested. And it's a difficult business. When I say there aren't randomly controlled clinical trials, partly because they're really difficult to organize. They're very costly to run to get anything that's truly of measurable value.
Yeah. Something I don't know if it was in either book, to be honest with you. Did you tackle or talk about cannabis oils and did you touch on cannabis?
No, I quite intentionally stayed away from talking much about supplements because, again, everything that I teach is really let's get the foundation right before we start doing the extras and all of the other things you could be doing.
I see.
That's what I found constantly, and I get a lot of medical professionals who are my students too, who are coming in. They're curious. They continue to be curious, and they want to check on is my foundation in terms of my beliefs.
Yeah.
Are they in alignment with what the evidence is saying?
And that's where it should be. That's where it needs to start, right? You
Yeah.
got to have a foundation for all this. Tell me, you've studied communities where people routinely live into their 90s, and what have you found that they're doing differently than most seniors, most people are doing?
Well, that's interesting. You asked that question because that was really part of why I continued to look at data and what led me to function. Right. So anyone who's interested in longevity knows about the blue zones by now, I would hope, given the media coverage. And while that's kind of interesting, no one really wants to live like a blue zone person. If you ask them, right?
Yeah.
They like the idea of living healthy long, but the lifestyle isn't really anything I aspire to. So there's a disconnect. So as the researcher, when I started to look at the data, well, what's going on in the U.S., right? So we know in the U.S. That life expectancy plateaued in around 2010. And it's been we've been losing ground against the rest of the world since the 1930s.
Yeah.
Just it's been a slow decline in terms of not keeping up. But as I started to look at the data, and actually came out of the 2016 census, I think that's the year it was, right, when they actually did longevity or life expectancy numbers for all of the electoral districts around the country. And coming out of that, I found over 60 communities that had life expectancies of over 90. Real outliers, but not one or two, right? Over 60 of them. And so that was kind of that validation of there's something going on here that we're not looking at, right? Because they're living next to communities. And I'll give an example within the LA area, Los Angeles area. Depending on where you are in Los Angeles, life expectancy is quite different. And it's not simply the social determinants of health, right? The ghettos that yes, clearly they're disadvantaged. They are not at the top. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. But let's put that aside and look at the rest of the population and say there's a lot of exceptions there. So it caused me to start to, again, ask this question, what are we missing? Because a lot of people are eating well. A lot of people are keeping active. Is it that diversity? Because, the whole diet thing is, I talk about diet in the book. It's important, but way overblown in terms of what people will think a diet will do for you when you start to split hairs around the anything around, we'll call the Mediterranean diet. Not that that's necessarily magic, but so it really kind of said, what are they doing? And the answer is, I don't know, would be the honest answer.
Okay.
But I clearly have gained some insights in the course of doing my research, and function clearly resonated with me around there's some things going on here that are part of daily life that people are doing a little bit different. And I think that's the difference in terms of just how we go about daily living, which is kind of what, the blue zones are, right? But here in the US, just how we go about daily living matters too. And there's clearly some differences that are happening that I think fly in the face of what conventional wisdom or beliefs are around, whether you live in the city, whether you live in the country, whether you live in the suburbs. You can have pretty good health span in a number of locations. There are some criteria, but the way you go about your day in terms of your movement activities matter more than anybody really thought, because we haven't really been measuring that because it's not real sexy. Nobody's going to make any money off that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that in a million years. If it would have been on a test, multiple choice test, I would have missed that one. Right?
Yeah, right. So one of them, which is the easy example to use, is walking.
Yeah.
Okay. So we study children from birth. Right, at about a year, thereabouts, they're taking the first steps, and the parents and grandparents are all excited. They took their first step. Right, we got to send the emails out, and then we follow that child through the progression into adolescence, and then we stop worrying about the other walking. They're doing fine, unless they're on the track team. So maybe they're on the track team now. We start to care about it, and we're measuring, right, how fast do they run.
Yeah.
Right. So that's clearly a functional measurement we're doing. All around track and field are all functional measurements. But then we kind of forget about them again through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, unless you have some injury and we need to get you back. And we don't worry about walking speed again until the other end when it starts to come under threat.
Right.
So, but the data's all there. So we've been measuring walking of normal people because we have to know what the reference is, right? That's part of research, is you have to have populations that are the reference, not just your outliers. And so we know for walking speed, just as an example, speed, which I keep mentioning, not steps. Speed matters more than steps, because just think about two individuals and one walks 25% faster than the other. They do the same number of steps, whatever that number is, over the course of a day. Which one do you think is going to have a longer health span?
So, well, a lot of it has to do with heart, right?
Well, the heart is feeding the walk, right?
Right.
So do you have the engine within you to walk a little bit faster? Uh-huh. But where I'm actually testing is, I don't think people know that, and I don't think they realize it matters. That they've been fixated. Well, I got my steps in today.
That's me. That's
right?
me until I read your book. That is me. And no one's told me, I walk a mile every day. I go on a treadmill. I walk a mile. It takes me 21 minutes. And looking at your book, good Lord, uh, that's pretty poor speed for where I should be or what would benefit me the most.
Right. And so I would ask you the question like I'd ask anybody. So when you're out walking normally, do you feel like you could walk a little faster?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's and that little bit just is so, and I'm sorry because all of this world, because it comes from medical, is all in metric. In the book, I tried to reduce it as much as I could, and just because those are the numbers I know. But zero point 0.1 meters per second, which is about 4 inches
Mm-hmm.
per second, and that's a couple of strides, so a couple of inches on your stride
Yeah.
adds up to about 10 years more health span.
Good Lord. Yeah.
Like, could you imagine if we knew that? Like, when and I didn't make this up. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't my data. There's nothing I created here, right? This is data from, just to give you an idea of size, right? Because walking is the biggest one we have. Over 700,000 subjects in these longitudinal trials, over 10 million person years is the data that I'm pulling from to do this. And so what I looked at was what's median and what does median look like in terms of for any age and whether you're for male or female, what does that look like across every 5 years? And then look at median, 75th and 90th percentile. And generally, median, we'll call it keeping up with the Joneses, probably doesn't match up with what your health span ambitions are.
Yeah.
So you'd like to find that out at 50 rather than 60.
Sure.
You'd rather find it at 60 rather than 70. You'd rather find it at 70 than 80, right? The earlier you find out, so you would say now, would you be willing to, or would, not for me, are you likely to start walking a little bit faster?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Because, yeah, like you're out there for this. Well, you actually would do the walk in less time.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Because I do a mile. That's because I've had some other issues with health and feet and so forth. A type 2 diabetic, but and after reading this, I did just that. And so instead of 2.9 on the, I went to 3.1. Was it a little more difficult? Yeah, but not. It wasn't like I fell down when I was done and, was dog tired. So I think that for me, that's a bit of the information that was hugely important in order to try to add more years to my life.
And your response is the normal response people have, right? Because it's something you're already doing. It's not something, well, you need to now start going to the gym or doing something, another to do to add onto your list. It all comes back to what are you doing already? And are you doing that with enough intention to get the job done?
Yeah.
So if you're going to go for a walk anyway, you might as well get as much as you can out of that walk rather than just kind of sauntering along and going through the motions.
Yeah. Well, your book really defines that and very helpful for people to realize that. If we could, I'd like to talk briefly about heart disease and stroke and, the leading causes of death in seniors for sure. What are the most preventable risks people should be actively managing right now in their lives as seniors?
Well, so from a disease standpoint, I assume that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Right. So it's atherosclerosis, which is the blockage in our arteries. So that's what generally gets lumped when we say heart disease. That's really what we're talking about. But that's the buildup of plaque either inside the artery or in the artery wall.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, one of the things, because I'm a data miner, and you'll find in WhealthSpan, I talk about that. The way we represent that data, the way CDC represents the data, is not doing you and I any favors. We get into these traps because that's the way it got started decades ago. It's like the Titanic. changing directions is really hard. Like, I would say BMI would be another one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people who follow, like, well, BMI is not really the best measure. You're right, but it's the one we have the most data on, and so that's why we continue to use it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So heart and stroke are the same. So when we think about 85 and 86% of heart deaths and stroke deaths are due to the exact same disease.
But it has to do with blockage.
Has to do with blockage. So it's built of a plaque in the arteries, and whether it happens on the arteries on your heart or the arteries like your carotid arteries that lead to the brain, it is the exact same artery in terms of arterial. The endothelium it's the same cells.
Yes.
They just happen to be feeding different organs, but it's the same disease.
So Scott, what preventable measures do people like me take, knowing that and having it in my face now, right?
Right.
I understand this now. I've been told by someone that's done the research or gathered the research. What can I do what kind of test should I ask my doctor for some kind of test? What should I do?
Yeah. So there are many tests. We can think, so the one most people would think about would be your lipids test. So what's your cholesterol?
Okay.
And if a primary care physician will say they're high, we need to get you on a statin. That's what most people hear. And so I'll just step back from that and say, hang on, cholesterol is a risk factor for heart disease. It is not a test for heart disease.
Okay.
A test for heart disease is very different. It just means you have a higher risk of heart disease. And again, it goes back to your supplement question. Before you sign up for any medication for the rest of your life, you better make sure you really need it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this isn't a shot at statins to say they're good or bad. It's saying, is it what you need? And so there are a few tests you can do for heart disease. Generally, the screening is the lipid test, your annual cholesterol numbers.
Okay.
They're looking at total cholesterol count, non-HDL, any number of things we could describe it, and they're looking for the LDL particle in terms of particle distribution would be a more detailed lipid test. But the easy test to do is called a coronary artery calcium scan.
Okay.
In most places, you can get it done yourself at an imaging center, so an X-ray, any place that does X-rays. Often doesn't require a prescription from your doctor. Some locations you do. That's why you'd have to call the imaging center directly and ask if you can get a CAC scan. Do you need a script? Cost is usually around $150. It's about a 5-minute test. And you lay on the CT scanner and it does a scan across your heart. And what it's looking for is calcium, just like the name implies. Mm-hmm. And calcium is old plaque. So your body, so the way heart disease works in this case is your immune system attacks the plaque, and over time it eventually solidifies that plaque, or it's actually all of the material it's like a scar that's built up within the wall of the artery, and it eventually calcifies, which is stable, right? So you're not going to die from calcium. You're going to die from loose plaque that bursts or comes loose and blocks. So calcium is not nearly the risk of plaque. So that's an easy test to get done. It takes minutes. There are other tests you can get done as well. There echocardiogram. These would typically be done by a cardiologist. Mm-hmm. There's CT scans. And generally the way the system works is you have to work your way up to the best test, because the best test always costs more, and the insurance company won't pay for it unless there's a justified need. So it'll take you through 3 tests to get to the one you really need, which you'll actually do like a heart flow measurement. So it's got contrast in the blood, and they'll actually monitor a CT while your heart's pumping, and they'll look at what's happening in all of the arteries around your heart and say, you've got a blockage there, or it's less than, or something of concern. And you may go in for an angiogram if you have chest pains or some other reason, where they're going to go in, and that's again in an OR room, and they're going to go in and they're going to take CT, but they're actually going to go in and potentially put a stent in, or like a balloon and a stent to open up an artery.
And so that's called a CIC test, did you say?
CAC, coronary artery calcium scan.
Gotcha. Okay, I had not heard of that before. Um, Interesting. So, many seniors, I live in a senior community, a Del Webb senior community here in the Dallas, Texas area, and about 500 residents. And I think, what I've heard from some when we talk about exercise and when I go to our amenity center and work out is many say that it's too late to make meaningful changes. So when is it too late to make meaningful changes, Scott?
It's never too late. It really isn't. And it goes back to a question you asked earlier, which I touched on maybe, but I'll go a little bit further with now. It's people underestimate their capacity. Right? They have little idea of where their limits really are. And so that's part of what my own experience was. I had no idea I could run.
Mm-hmm.
I had, in middle school, I had one phys ed class where something happened and I had a great run. Never happened before, never happened after. Till I was in my 40s and I had my own kind of awakening. And instead of buying a convertible at age 40, I bought a bicycle, which kind of got me because I loved riding my bike as a kid. And didn't I discover it? No, I actually had some running ability, but I had to work to get there. But I could tell you, I had no idea. Like I was in the falls training for the Nationals half marathon.
Wow.
Everyone would have agreed that, I was crazy had I said that in my 30s. And so it's just a question of starting to apply a bit of discipline. And it kind of goes back to what I put on WhealthSpan was, why do you want to live longer? I think that's such a core question, right? Not just because, longer is better. Well, why? Like, what is it you're going to live longer for, right? There's got to be some carrot, because is there an expectation that you're going to get a bigger birthday cake, a bigger celebration? Because I can tell you, one of the downsides of living longer is a lot of your friends are going to die.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? It gets lonely. Ultimately, what it comes down to for most people is those moments, right? Those things that impacted you. You don't know when they're going to come along, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't design them, but they happen, and you just you're in a conversation, and you'll just go back to a moment, and say, "Yeah, I remember that. That was really pivotal."
Yeah.
And it could have been something. We, as grandparents, for example, we often think of things about our children and our grandchildren. But they could be any number of things. And so that's really, I ask people to say, think about what it is you want. And if that's your motivation, now you've got something to point it at versus this arbitrary thing. Well, telling somebody they should be doing more. Well, why? Like they honestly don't know why.
Yeah.
Because they've never thought about it that way.
Yeah. Aren't I supposed to? Right.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to. Well, are you passionate about anything? Do you actually have something that you can contribute to the world? What's your purpose and so forth, right?
Yeah, well, and that's partly why Function is such a great pairing for WhealthSpan, because WhealthSpan was more the generic of the framework of things. Function really tells you, again, maybe you don't need more cardiovascular and you're just fine. You don't need to become a big walker. Don't worry.
Yeah.
That you feel like you should be doing more when you really don't need to. Find out what you need to do, because that's really what Function was about, was to say, how do you figure out what you need?
Yeah.
Just because your sister, brother, whatever may need it because whatever, that doesn't mean you need it. And that to me is really empowering, and it's really been missing from the conversation.
Well, it's very revealing. That's for sure, and super helpful. Scott, we're down to the end of this, but I always ask my guests one question at the very end, and it's tell me, what's the one question that I should have asked you that would be pertinent to our discussion and important for the audience to hear? Is there one question I should have asked you?
I think the one question everybody asks me, what's the one thing I should do?
Mm-hmm.
Which I never was able to answer. And that's the one thing with function now is I tell them, now I have an answer to that question is find out your blind spot.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that most people, so ask the question of yourself is what's my blind spot? It's okay to find out because you got time to do something about it.
Yeah.
Because it will matter. This is not something that's just going to magically go away. You're kind of wasting your time on the other stuff if you're not addressing that. But I think it's just a really, I would encourage people to start to believe that there's a lot more opportunity, even though you're positive minded already. Mm-hmm. I will tell you that there's more out there for you to get if you just start to believe that there's more there than just going through the motions. Just resist that tendency to lay back and go through the motions. I think that's maybe the one thing that our culture is so driven around. I saw it was AI generated video for some, I don't know what it was, investment thing. Just some of the latest garbage, but it's still the same old message around just take it easy. Mm-hmm. You worked hard. This is a time to take it easy. There's more to life than taking it easy. Taking it easy feels a lot better after you've done something.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you don't take it easy, but in balance, find a balance that actually you're rewarding yourself for having done some really good work.
Well, Scott, I've enjoyed this conversation, and the two books are right here. They're WHEALTHSPAN and Function. And open your eyes. Grab the function book at the very least, and I think it will help everybody discover what you need to know, and it'll help you a lot. So, Scott, thank you so much for spending time with me. I know you're a very busy guy, and I wish you the best success, most success in your future, and thanks again. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Jim. Been great talking to you.